The years right after World War II, they were just this incredible, explosive period of economic growth in American history. It's what built the modern nation we live in today. But here's the thing. This boom wasn't some happy accident. And in this explainer, we're going to dive into how it was meticulously, deliberately engineered. So that's the big question, right? Was it just dumb luck, the natural result of winning a massive global war? Or was this boom actually built piece by piece with a blueprint? That's exactly what we're going to tackle. I think the best way to really wrap your head around this era is to think of it less like a random surge of good fortune and more like a powerful machine, one that was carefully designed and built for one purpose: to generate prosperity. So let's pop the hood and see how that machine was actually put together. Okay, so let's look at the core components. This wasn't just one thing. It was this powerful combination of really specific government actions and some amazing private creativity that set the whole stage. This growth machine really had three main gears, all turning in perfect concert. First, you had intentional, deliberate federal policies. Second, you had these game-changing private innovations hitting the market. And third, the fuel for the whole thing were massive, massive demographic shifts. Let's break down that first piece: federal policy. So, the absolute cornerstone of this entire structure was the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944. You and I know it as the GI Bill. Now, it's often talked about as just a simple thank you to the veterans, but believe me, it was so much more than that. See, the GI Bill was genius because it had this dual purpose. On one hand, you have the public promise, right? A well-deserved thank you to millions of veterans. But on the other hand, you have this brilliant economic strategy. By sending millions of vets to college, the government did two things. It prevented a massive unemployment crisis, and at the same time, it engineered a more skilled, higher-earning middle class that would fuel the economy for decades to come. So the government invested in people, sure, but it also invested in a whole lot of concrete and steel. The Interstate Highway Act was just a monumental undertaking. We're talking 41,000 miles of new highway. This didn't just make it easier to visit your grandma, it completely revolutionized logistics. It supercharged the trucking industry, and it made the entire suburban lifestyle, living in one town and working in another, possible on a massive scale. And we can't talk about this era without mentioning the elephant in the room: the Cold War. As terrifying as it was, this geopolitical standoff unlocked unbelievable levels of federal spending. All that money poured into defense, aerospace, and brand new electronics industries, creating tons of jobs and spurring huge technological leaps, especially out in the South and the West. Okay, now for our second major driver: private innovation. The government laid the groundwork, but it was industry that built the consumer world right on top of it. And a lot of it hinged on some surprisingly simple technologies. So let me ask you this. What pretty mundane invention was absolutely essential for making huge parts of America livable? Air conditioning. I know, it sounds almost trivial, but you simply cannot have a massive, sustained population and industrial boom in places like Texas, Arizona, and Florida without it. AC made factories workable and homes livable all year round, and that directly enabled the migration of millions of people and thousands of businesses to what would become the Sun Belt. And AC wasn't working alone. You had this whole suite of other innovations building this new consumer world. The automobile, thanks to those efficient wartime production methods, became a middle-class necessity, not a luxury. The credit card completely rewired American culture, shifting it from saving to spending. And then there was the television, which acted as the ultimate engine of desire, beaming the ideal suburban life and all the products that came with it directly into millions of homes every single night. So government and industry built the machine, but a machine needs fuel. And that fuel, well, it was people. A massive demographic wave that drove demand for everything and put the entire nation on the move. Just get your head around this number. Between 1945 and 1960, the U.S. population exploded by over 50 million people. This wasn't just a little bump, it was a demographic tidal wave. And think about the ripple effect. First, all those new families need houses, which fuels a construction boom. Then they need cars and appliances and clothes, which fuels manufacturing. Then they need schools and hospitals. It was this relentless, rolling wave of demand. All that demand for space and housing led to one of the most defining features of the whole era: the rise of the suburbs. It became the physical manifestation of the American dream. But, as we're about to see, this dream came with a central, glaring contradiction. So, how do you meet that incredible demand? How do you build millions of homes fast? Well, you get a guy like William Levitt. He looked at the assembly line that built bombers for the war and saw a way to build homes. He didn't just build subdivisions, he industrialized the very idea of home construction. And his method was the key. It was brilliant. He broke down the process of building a house into 27 standardized steps. He used pre-cut, mass-produced materials. And then, instead of moving the house down a line, he moved specialized crews of workers from one plot to the next, each one performing a single task over and over. The result was just astonishing. Dozens of affordable homes built every single day, perfectly meeting the demand of this new middle class. But here is where the story takes a very dark turn. While federal policies were engineering wealth for some Americans, they were simultaneously designing racial segregation right into the system. The American dream had a blueprint, all right? But that blueprint had lines drawn all over it to keep certain people out. This practice was called redlining. Federal agencies literally created maps of American cities and drew red lines around neighborhoods where minority populations lived. These areas were officially deemed high risk for investment, which effectively choked off all access to the very same federally backed mortgages that were making the dream of suburbia possible for white families. And this created a stark, deeply engineered divide. For millions of white families, the government opened the door wide to homeownership, which has always been the primary tool for building generational wealth in America. And at the exact same time, it systematically slammed that door shut for minority communities, creating a racial wealth gap that has persisted for generations, even to this day. So this boom didn't just reshape our cities and our economy, it literally redrew the entire map of American power. As millions of people chased jobs and opportunity, the nation's entire center of gravity made a dramatic and permanent shift. You can see this great power shift so clearly here. While the old industrial heartland, the Rust Belt, started to stagnate, the Sun Belt just exploded. It gained massive population. It attracted all the future-facing industries like aerospace and tech. And with all those people and all that money, it gained immense political power that would reshape the country for the rest of the century. So ultimately, when you step back and look at the whole picture, this era wasn't about small tweaks. It was about four massive tectonic shifts. Economically, demographically, socially, and politically, America was fundamentally re-engineered, setting the patterns of both growth and inequality that would define the decades to come. And all of this brings us to a final thought. We've seen how deliberate policy choices engineered the America of the past, shaping where people could live and who could prosper. It really forces us to ask, what federal action or even inaction today is quietly engineering the America of tomorrow? That's the question this history leaves us with.